Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, a show where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. Whether you're a manager, a trainer, a leader, an owner of a coffee shop, you have the ability to shape and to create something that is lasting, meaningful, intentional, powerful. This is why we exist as Keys to the Shop. I would encourage you to go and subscribe to the show on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, all of those different places. Go to Instagram and follow us at Keys to the Shop. We do this podcast, but we also do the Keys to the Shop consulting and coaching, which means I get to work directly with you one-on-one to coach you and your leadership team to greater levels, higher levels of operations, quality, and profitability in your business, ultimately making something that is going to serve you and serve your community very, very well. So we've been doing this for quite a long time now. And again, a subscription to the show helps because it helps you navigate all the content. We've got probably 1,020 publications so far. And we've been doing consulting for quite a long time as well. I've worked with over 85 different coffee companies in the last 8.5 years. And I love being able to work with the coffee community to create a better future for coffee shops. So reach out, Chris at keystotheshop.com. That's where you can find more information about all of that. And just talk to me and ask questions. Let's have a conversation. That's what we do. That's what the show is, conversations, whether it's me to you through a screen, one-on-one, or with guests like today's episode. So thanks, everybody, for doing that. Now, I want to first say, we can do this show because of sponsors like today's sponsors. That is Arto Brick. In LA, they run a really amazing stone, tile, hard surfaces company, Arto Brick. And also our friends over at Pacific. They have the Pacific Barista Series, plant-based beverages. We're going to talk more about both of those companies later in today's episode. But right now, let's get into the main thing, and that is a conversation with the CEO of Big Peach Running Co. That is Mike Cosentino. So Big Peach is one of the largest, most recognized specialty retailers in North America with specialty units that spans the specialty running and cycling communities and retail segments. It's headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, and the company serves athletes and fitness enthusiasts of every level. And it's the brick and mortar locations that are really just dynamic and really experiential. They have e-commerce platform as well that's really awesome, and an innovative mobile retail experience called Big Peach on Wheels. Again, the website you can go to learn more about all of this is at bigpeachrunningco.com. Really just Google search Big Peach and you can learn a lot about this company, and it immediately strikes you they're working on and have built something special in the years that they've been running this. No pun with the running there, but this conversation specifically is not only about the culture of hospitality and leadership and, the business that Mike has developed through Big Peach. It's about a book that he's written called It's Not the Bricks, It's the Mortar, which talks about optimizing retail business for success, lasting success. And it really is this framework for service-driven retail organizations. I enjoy this conversation a lot because we are thinking a lot about what can we do in coffee shops. Keys to the Shop is not about the online store. And okay, I'm great with you having an online store. I think you should have an online store. I think it's awesome to have an online store. You need it. But we have a real opportunity here in coffee and specialty coffee to really revitalize and have a renaissance of the in-shop experience, the retail experience. And this conversation with Mike Cosentino is going to really help set in place in your mind a goal and a framework and some inspiration to help you pursue that in your cafe or your cafes. We talk about scaling, we talk about culture and growth, we talk about intentionality, and just a people focus that is truly backed by systems, but born from a certain kind of a focus that you can't just get through systems, but systems can help with. And so this is a really helpful conversation. I'm really appreciative of Mike being on the podcast and telling his story and helping us make our coffee shops better. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Here now is my conversation with the CEO of Big Peach Running Co., Mike Cosentino. Well, Mike, pleasure to have you on the show. Welcome to Keys to the Shop.
Thanks, Chris. It's my pleasure to be here.
I really enjoy the idea of focusing on the mortar and not the bricks. Obviously, you need both, but just
Sure.
it's so captivating. And the idea of, retail and making a successful retail business focusing on people is just right up our alley here on the show. And you do this in the world of running, and stores that cater to people buying shoes and buying gear. And while it's not coffee, I mean, people run on coffee, not to use any kind of Dunkin' Donuts phraseology here. But the,
You did it pretty
uh,
well.
thank you. Yeah. Well, but there's so many parallels, and we were just chatting that it's a lot of parallels between, almost any kind of retail expression. You can find these connections, and people tend to be the connection. So I'm excited to just jump in here, but maybe we should talk a little bit about what got you as a person into the world of running, but then the world of running retail. I mean, because not everyone who runs starts a you know successful running store. So what's the story, Mike?
And again, thanks for doing this. There is so much overlap between where your enthusiasms are and where mine are, and where I think the respective businesses that we get a chance to spend time in. And really, there are a couple of different things when we talk about running and retail, but it was running for me that preceded the retail. I was quite a while ago, and I'm here in Atlanta. I was with the Coca-Cola company, and before that, I was with an agency that worked with a lot of, pretty recognizable, even global brands. And I was one of those guys that, 3 airports a week, 4 to 6 days every week, being outside of Atlanta and where I called home. And when I got here, I was somewhat connected to my fitness routine, but candidly, it was mostly through being a cyclist and playing a lot of
Mm,
tennis. Those weren't the easiest things to just take on the road once I started traveling as much as I was. And
yeah.
so I kind of came by default to running. And if I'm honest with myself, I think it would have been almost easier not to do anything. But I know you can appreciate this, and a lot of people you work with perhaps even applaud this, where a lot of client dinners, right? I have to admit, I was probably drinking more than I should have been, especially at some of those client dinners. And it was almost this thing that if I'm going to be on the road a lot, if I'm going to be in these environments as much as I am, I should probably burn a few calories along the way. And running was just the default, because no matter where I was, I could pack a pair of running shoes and kind of get to it early in the morning. And man, I just fell in love with it. And before you knew it, running a few times a week, a few miles at a time, became running more miles more often. And then, of course, like you hear people say, signing up for my first race or doing my first half marathon. And ultimately, it became this thing where I was running on a really regular basis to sometimes make the travel even that much more enjoyable. One of those things where I would sign up for a race on the backside of my trip, might be a full marathon, eventually ultra marathons, and got to be reasonably good at it. And then, as you can appreciate, just like with coffee, I'm sure people start asking you questions about, well, gosh, my knee hurts a little bit. Why do you think that is? Or do you have any suggestions as to what I should wear at the beginning of a race? Or are there running shoes that you like more than another? And it ultimately led to where I am now, where it's still being enthusiastic about running, but obviously being very connected to the service element.
So people gave you the clue that you were seen as somebody who wasn't just a peer enthusiast, but somebody who had authority enough to answer a question. That's interesting because it's almost a first lesson in listening to your customer without them being a
Mm.
customer.
Indeed. And, in 2001, I had this personal triple crown that I wanted to do. It was Boston Marathon in April, Western States 100 endurance race in June, and then the Ironman Florida event in Panama City in November. And
Wow.
many of your listeners know in between that second event, after I had finished Western States 100, but before Ironman Florida was September 11th.
Mm.
And it was like, for so many people, this introspective moment where now what I really wanted was not to just have these personal ambitions around my fitness or my running, but to be able to do something meaningful with it. So you're exactly right, Chris, where it was that clue where people were already kind of coming to me and asking questions. And even if I didn't at that time really think about how it could be helpful, maybe even transformative for someone if they got the right amount of encouragement along with the advice. And that sent me on my way. And the business plan for Big Peach was actually started on September 12th. And it has, in my opinion, become this occupational calling ever since.
Mike, I think then I mean, obviously, Big Peach started as a business plan, but then you had Store One, where you had to decide in and amongst all of the other running stores out there. I'm not sure how many you were in direct competition with, but this is something that is this occupational calling where you do have some things that people would expect from a store that does this thing. It is the market that you're in. But then there's the Mike Cosentino way, which is the Big Peach. I'm sure how Store One was formulated is we want to deliver this kind of thing to these kind of people for that result. What did that look like on paper and then in practice?
So you're right, and this is where I think some of the carryover of our respective industries is so deep, especially for those when they start. And I still remember this as if 20 years had not already gone by, and that was there were others that were doing exactly what we were doing. The products that we had, candidly, even before as much online shopping as what happens today, the products were available elsewhere. And we did not have the experience that those operations did or the individuals inside those operations did. So, what we did, and I still remember creating this list that ultimately became what we call the service quotient. And we did this in 2005 to say, well, what can we bring that, although not uncommon by term, but oftentimes is uncommon in a hospitality or a service first environment? And the first was just friendliness. As elementary as that sounds, Chris, whether it was a new team member or us as a new business, taking the approach to just be this incredibly friendly, warm, welcoming environment. We didn't know what the difference was between a pair of shoes we had on the wall and what two versions were ago. We didn't have two versions ago. We didn't exist then. We didn't have all the prices memorized because we hadn't been doing it long enough to do so. There were a lot of things that tactically, mechanically, you could get at another place that was going to be better than what you would in the first 2 years of coming to Big Peach. But what you weren't going to get was a more friendly environment. The other thing that we talk about is enthusiasm. Here's the thing that we know. And even to this day, there are too many environments where, despite the fact it's a little bit intimidating, you mentioned that we're in running. What people wouldn't necessarily think about with Big Peach, over 50% of people who purchase shoes from us will not use them for running. Now, they may use them for fitness. They do a walking routine. They want to be comfortable when they're taking their dog out in the mornings. They are on their feet all day. They're part of a medical or health and wellness profession that requires, maybe they're a middle school teacher, that they just know they're going to be on their feet for long hours. But just because we're Big Peach Running Company or Big Peach Ride and Run, it is a little bit of a myth that everybody who comes through our doors is somebody who's going to qualify for the Olympic trials or want to do the Boston Marathon or even go out and participate in a 5K. That's just not true. So enthusiasm for people in general was a big part of it as well. And then lastly, empathy. And empathy is this hugely clinical term with so many different derivatives that I wouldn't want to instruct what people should do in terms of empathy. But if you think about the fact, man, people are going to be coming in here for different reasons, but they came in here for a reason. And to try to take the time, ask questions, listen diligently, and respond in a thoughtful way, those were the things that we committed ourselves to doing. And quite frankly, more than made up for the fact that we didn't have prices memorized. We didn't know what previous versions might have been like in shoes that people had worn before. And the simple fact that the products that we had weren't all that uncommon and were priced largely the same as what they were somewhere else.
I guess that really shows that people's desire is more than transactional when they're going and investing time and energy. They're sacrificing a part of their day to go into a physical location of a business. And to satisfy that wouldn't be enough to simply give them the shoes that they technically are good for them, you know, their body type or their shoe size and the color that goes good with their eyes, whatever it is. But it's something a little bit deeper than that that you just attacked head on, which is this friendliness, this empathy. And I first of all want to draw something for our coffee audience. We sell coffee, but not everybody is going to be a coffee expert who drinks our coffee, who buys our beans. They don't have to have the pour over setup that we want them to have. They're not going to be on the stage competing with it, but they're drinking it. And we can be happy that they're happy, yeah, using it the way, you know, if you have a pair of Hoka shoes and you're just using it to take out the garbage, great. I mean, there it is. Same thing with our coffees that are very amazing. We're like, do you know what this coffee can do? I'm like, no, I know what it does for me. And that's pretty much enough. But that's an empathy piece. It's like, can you get inside the world of enjoyment that that person gets from the thing that you create enough to be happy with that? You are in this sport of running where, in my mind, I only did like 1 year of high school cross country. I loved it. But it's a solitary sport in a lot of ways because you're by yourself on the road very often. But it sounds like because you had all these people, these questions, you get to know people a lot. Am I a little bit misguided in thinking, well, this is kind of like a solo sport in because you have people around you still, though, that you get to know through the races and through the community of running and so forth in these races. Did that really plant the seeds in you and develop in you this start with empathy, start with friendliness value?
So, I mean, again, the overlap is so fantastic here, Chris, where I think of two things. You know, first of all, with coffee and the coffee culture, right? I have been drinking coffee long enough to say I might be able to hold my own with some people who are doing it professionally, but I'm not 100% certain.
Yeah.
And there are still times every once in a while when I'm on the road or I go somewhere, I'm like a little bit intimidated that if I go to the counter and I don't pronounce it right, or if I don't know a little bit about the blend, that I'm not sure I belong there. And man, we don't want those barriers. And yet at the same time, there are people who, you know, candidly, Big Peach is not their best option. If you're just super stressed for time on weekends and you need to be able to get a baseball glove, a pickleball paddle, and a soccer jersey while you also pick up your running shoes, we're not the right option, right? There are places that have all those things. Same thing if you're just, you know, absolutely committed to finding the lowest price for everything you purchase. We respect that. We're a sit and fit service first environment where we're MSRP or less perhaps, but for the most part, it's our service that is going to lead, not our pricing. So if you want the lowest price, we're probably not the best option. The other thing that I will say as it relates to, you know, a solo sport that is similar to coffee, when we are serving those people who are in our midst, they are looking for something beyond the product. And when I'm at a coffee shop, I'm looking for a great environment, maybe to have a meeting, a place that just makes me feel like I'm going to be more productive, a place where I'm taking somebody who I care about, or I think I might develop a relationship and I want them to be comfortable. The coffee like the running shoes, are so pervasive in the marketplace that being mindful of everything from the experience that someone's going to have to the environment they're going to find themselves while they're having it is what we obsess over more than some of the things that we would call bricks or that are much more visible perhaps from the outside, not necessarily walking in, but just making an observation and looking at.
Yeah, beautifully said. Yeah, and you have bricks. Everyone's bricks are different. Where you have the displays, how they're lit, what you want to feature. If a new thing is in, like if the classic and tried and true, you put it in this. There's architecture, there's psychology, there's all this stuff that goes into it. But then there's the social experience, the experience of interacting with the people who represent the brand that could just drop the ball right in the middle of almost there. But then the most beautiful places can sometimes be the most disheartening because of that reliance only on the architecture of it and not what happens within the architecture of it. And so when we did cross, what I remember from many moons ago was we used to walk the track, or walk the route beforehand to just get warmed up. Also to figure out what's going on with this turn, that turn. So when you're running, sometimes I've seen these videos where people just get, I don't know, they're tired and they make a wrong turn. And it's very tragic because they weren't really familiar with the course as well as they were. Yeah. So it sounds like a little bit of that course familiarity where you got to look at what is the customer's journey going to look like? What is my own journey going to look like? Because not every time are we, you said diligently pursuing empathy and being friendly, which to me feels like, it's a challenge sometimes to do that. Not everybody is going to feel 100% all through their shift in the stores. So how do you set up a culture of empathy and friendliness in a retail environment that takes into account the course that your staff are on and also the course that your customers are on?
So there's a range, I believe, in, and it's a lot easier to talk about, right? Let's just be honest that it's easy for me to suggest, man, we just have this ever present environment and attitude of friendliness. And like you and all of the business owners who are part of your audience and quite frankly, part of what, makes both of, our respective industries fantastic. There are challenges to that. There are days that even I'm sure I'll admit for myself, not feeling all that friendly, right? But what it is an intention that is followed by specific actions and ultimately a plan. And then when we look at what the other side of the equation is, we have to acknowledge that when there are those challenges, that the momentum favors the intention than just what might be otherwise a random consideration. So let's put this in really practical terms. There's a new hire, and a new hire in your shop in one of my stores is making far more observations on shift number one, or perhaps during the interview, if that's where the initial interview took place, than anything that could be discussed or even suggested or ultimately handed to them in a training manual. So the environment, as it, kind of cascades in their direction, ultimately something that they kind of soak in, is going to do much more than any initial statement an owner or a store manager makes, more than any sentence could powerfully indicate what the expectation is. So being intentional about these things, everything from our character icon, our running peach that's meant to not look intimidating, that's intended to appear friendly, all the way to the way we write our training manual with it's a little bit of tongue in cheek, not taking ourselves seriously, talking about things like the service quotient right away, that we're not talking about midsole technologies. We're not talking about the different equipment we use to fit someone and how many pixels the images have or what the speed is on the frames when we take video to assess biomechanics. We'll get to that. But we still start with the service quotient. We still start with the expectation of an honest, personal indication of gratitude before someone leaves, whether they make a purchase or not. And once that stuff starts to sit in, and it's the intentionality that's put behind, it's like no matter how you feel, if you've got someone starting today and today is their first day of training, the intention and the expectation are these things first. It cannot just be, well, we'll pick up the manual. Today's Tuesday, so we're training the new team members in this particular store. Let's get to page one and presume that it's not about who we are at our core. We have to be Big Peach first. We have to be people centered, and we have to get into what sets us apart from everybody else long before we get into the technical specification of product or what our team members ultimately come to memorize.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, come to memorize. There is, you can't really memorize that quotient that you're the people first mentality. It's a, you could, but the application of it requires engagement constantly. You can memorize facts about the shoe, about, you know, the coffee itself. People ask you a question about it, you can answer the question, and it's meaningful to them, and you have the answer. But to deliver great service in the moment requires vigilance in the moment, not just memorization. And that seems to be a personality issue. Well, let's just say this. We talk about in hiring, and this is my question, I think, is assembling a team of people who are trained in this, to me feels like they're already people who are on that trajectory, who are with that kind of approach to life or to business. What is it that you look for in people to join the team so that you're not just trying to convince somebody against their will to be a people person because they love running? You're like, well, you know, a lot of coffee people do this. This person's really unfriendly, but they got a lot of experience, and I really need somebody to work behind the bar. So I'm just going to make this decision. I can fix them later and all that stuff. And they come later on, they're just thinking, why did I ever make that desperation decision? So how do you avoid that? What do you look for to get people in that are already running that course?
So a couple of things. I mean, I smile because I just love the overlap. So first, we go back to friendliness. Friendly interactions are perpetrated by friendly people. And that's not something that we're in a particularly good position to teach or to train. So we get all the time, it's like, oh, I decided to apply because I love running. Well, that's awesome. But if we're honest, we don't really care. The bigger question is, well, do you love to serve? Do you love to listen to others talk about where they are in their fitness journey or what they want out of a pair of shoes? Because if you come into one of our stores, I can regale you with all kinds of experiences I've had at different races and traveling where I've met friends for runs and different places that I thought were the coolest place to go for. If I'm honest, you don't care. I don't blame anybody else for not caring. And they certainly, while they're spending time and money with me, don't want to hear about it. But if I'm asking questions and saying, hey, Chris, man, tell me, you said you did cross country one year and now we have the good fortune of having you in one of our stores. What brought you back? What is it that's still in the recesses of your mind that now made you think maybe, just maybe, I could get into this again? Right? That question isn't about me loving running. It's about me wanting to know more about you. So I can put myself in a better position to serve. And so someone who does not have that interest, even if they're likely to make the 2028 Olympic team, isn't going to be a good asset for our business, because them just loving running, them being one of the best runners in the community or maybe on the planet, isn't going to create the atmosphere that the best coffee shop or the best running store or the best service environment needs.
That is really interesting because you almost have to love what running produces, you know, or that culture and that community of, you know, something either deeper or transcendent in the idea of what running is, or the thing itself. So there's this, you say it's the mortar, because when you look at a brick house, I mean, equally, like I say, well, that's a mortar house as well, right? There's bricks,
Absolutely. More so if you were going to ask the contractor.
right? But we focus on the thing that it's primarily known for. And so technical excellence is tends to be the really, I talk about how, if you're ice skating and you're not used to it, you hold on to the side of the rink. You're like, oh, I don't know, I'm a little shaky here. And we
Mhm.
hang on to our technical know-how as sort of a safety net to preserve us in our professional pursuits. And we don't want to venture out to balance on the ice because we know we might fall. And you have an aspiration to do this work of hospitality and service and be the mortar that holds that all together, all this, the technical stuff together. But even that can sometimes be like you were talking about, sometimes we don't feel friendly. There is a challenge. What do you do when there is a challenge? How do you stay the course with a team, being gracious to them, but also addressing challenges head on without making too many allowances, or misappropriating the word friendly to be permissive towards unfriendliness?
So, two things, and the expression that everybody's familiar with, fake it till you make it. And I think there are different schools of thought as to whether there's some legitimacy to that particular expression. There are ones that our leadership team that I will say, fake it till you feel it. There are times when you're not feeling enthusiastic or friendly or particularly gracious, maybe even grateful. If you're going to represent a brand and you're going to empower someone as the leader, as the founder, as the owner, as the store manager, the cafe manager to lead, they also have a responsibility as the ambassador of the brand and the product. The product at the end of the day isn't in what's in the cup or what's in the box that someone takes with them. The product is the shop itself, is the store, is the brand. And so, in my opinion, those who you've entrusted in roles of leadership occasionally have to fake it until they feel it. And then if we look beyond that expression, how do you ensure that that is something that can be done and be done sometimes in very difficult circumstances? Is looking at what is the long-term consideration, not talking about business success. Our mission, we talk about to grow, to support, to enhance an active lifestyle. That's our mission. It's not about opening stores, selling units of shoes, hiring team members. To grow, to support, to enhance an active lifestyle. I believe each cafe should have a mission. And even in the toughest moments, not the ones that are just going to bring us to our knees, paralyze us. In those instances, we need to step away. But in the tough moments, if we can look past the difficult patron, right? Because there are going to be plenty of those. If we can look past whoever it was who didn't show up that now is going to make today really hard, and we look at that longer term view, aspiration, the stated mission, it does become much easier to fake it till you feel it. People are watching. If you are the designated leader, make no mistake, your cues are being followed. Your example matters. And everything you do that is not in connection with what you want others to do only makes your job harder. So do yourself a favor today and make your tomorrow easier by putting an example forth that people will say, that's the way you do it. And I'm going to get better at it. And I'll be even better at it tomorrow or next week.
Hey, everybody, it's Chris. I wanted to let you know about our sponsors and talk just a little bit about both of them today. I really appreciate the people and the product behind both of these companies, starting with our friends at Arto Brick. On Instagram, that's at Arto Brick. Reach out to Armin, who runs the company with his brother Vod. They're the second generation to run this company, named after their father, Armin. Who started this tile and stonework and hard surface company in Los Angeles. Everything is made, manufactured, finished, shipped from there. If you got a dream about the way you want your coffee shop to look, the floor, the backsplash, an accent wall, it really is all about the feel of the space, coming down to the materials that you use. So if that's something on your mind and you say, I have a vision, I got a creative idea, well, Arto can make it happen. Just reach out to them, DM Armin on Instagram at Arto Brick. Now, our other sponsor today is the Pacific Food Service Barista Series. Go to pacificfoodservice.com and get samples. Try this in your shop. Steam it, and steaming is believing. Okay. So we definitely have loved having them as a sponsor of the show for a very long time. Their product stands up to the heat from steaming, produces great texture for latte art. It also creates balance in the beverage. So you can focus on the coffee with every drink, and your customers will love this. So if you're looking for the best plant-based beverage for your guests to enjoy and really have things feature your coffee in the best possible light, even when not using a regular dairy, then this is the company to go and check out. Again, over at pacificfoodservice.com. Yes. I love this idea of, it sounds terrible to say fake it till you feel it, except for when you realize that you are, what the phrase I've heard a few times this year is, don't doubt in the darkness what was revealed in the light. If you were convinced that this was the way when you were fed, you had good sleep, and you were just off of like some, video highlight reel of the sport or the thing you were into, and you're like, man, I love this. And then the next day, the opposite is true. Just put your faith, maybe faith it till you make it. I don't know. Like you
Ooh, I
just,
love that.
yeah, but it's not without its merit, because you know that there was a reason. You're just relying more heavily on that reason. But what the way you're talking about this sounds a lot like the way that you would plan for a race. I know midstream, no matter what the race is and your capacity, people plan for how they're going to keep themselves upright and putting one foot in front of the other. There's breathing patterns. There's, different kinds of sugar intake that they have to have midway to replenish something that's spent. And it sounds like now, with as many stores as you have, there's a lot of planning operationally that goes into support that mission, just as much as somebody would plan out, well, I know I'm going to be tired at this point, so therefore I'm going to replenish with this, and I've already experienced that, so I know it's going to work. What does that look like for having multiple locations now to coordinate operations to deliver this at scale?
So, and a couple of things, and Chris, I listened to one of your episodes where you talked about sometimes scale can be really dangerous, where the end does not justify the means. And I fully agree with that. Now I'm, incredibly privileged to be able to work with the number of people we do, and some of the communities where we have stores. I believe we are doing work way, way, way beyond just
Mm.
that of a local retailer, where we're making a difference, that our presence in that community matters a ton. So that certainly helps. But there are two things. Number one, and where there's again just tremendous carryover between our respective industries, the definition of experience, that, and even let's look at CX, right? A lot of people are going to be familiar with those two letters together. So for customer experience, if I asked you to define customer, I think most people would be able to come up with a pretty good definition where almost all of us would say, yep, I agree with that. In our stores, we call them a guest. I know there are probably shops that might call them a patron or whatever it might be. They're all going to fall under the same umbrella. And the same thing would be true if you were using visitor or you were in a different industry, but it was still requiring hospitality. But the experience, when we talk about customer experience, the experience where the definition is so varied, where we would get lots of different people defining it differently. So the one definition that we use when we go from one store to another, when we go from one week to another, all that is perceived, understood, and remembered. All that is
Mm.
perceived, understood, and remembered. And with that as a thread through each location, and we just think about those three terms. What is the perception someone's having? Heck, we can go back to that person who may be an Olympic trials qualifier, or that person who is also on our team, who's a walker, and he does it 3 days a week. His total mileage is 6 miles. He's not going to LA in 2028. But the reality is that when someone perceives that, oh, I was helped by somebody who might make the Olympic team, that's not really what you want to lean into, that they're going to come back. But if their perception was, this person seemingly cared so much that if all they did was work with me today, whether I made a purchase or not, their biggest intent was to make my day better and give me confidence that I could do 1 more mile next week than I'm doing this week, man, I bet they're coming back. So all that is perceived, understood, and remembered, that goes everywhere with us, and working on things that are like, well, how are they perceiving us? What did they understand by the time they left? Not what the midsole technologies were, or what the drop of a shoe is, or the fabrics they're using in the top part of the shoe. But what do they understand about us and them as it relates to a relationship? And then what do we want them to remember? Being mindful before the interaction begins that a memory will be created, whether it lasts for a few seconds or whether it lasts for years, where people are still telling a story about what happened inside our store or cafe. That helps a ton, because that just travels everywhere. Whether we have one store, whether we have 10 stores, whether we have 1,000 stores, all that is perceived, understood, and remembered. No, I was just saying, and then secondly, it goes back to what you said earlier, Chris, in terms of, people are the ones who carry that. So we have to be intentional if we're going to have people. We can't be in two places at once. But that's true in our shop if we only have one. We can't have our back to the front door making a drink and be the face of somebody who is paying at that very moment. As soon as there is a second person in the operation, we can no longer do it all. So having a second store, quite frankly, there's more real estate and certainly there's some complexity. But I talk in my book where uninvolved optimization is the pursuit, where from the jump, we need to be mindful as leaders. How do we not only pursue results? How do we not only pursue what we believe is the image of success with a guest, with sales totals, with the annual or quarterly performance, but not only pursuing results, but the transition of the task to someone who can ultimately do it as well, or perhaps someday better than we can. And that only happens with intentionality. Ultimately saying, here's how we want to take someone's payment. And we don't have to give you the words to say, but we can give you this understanding that there's going to be a memory here and your expression of gratitude matters. So now I can have my back to somebody who is paying. And I know not only is the transaction going to get completed accurately, but this person is going to feel this place is really glad I was here. Not because I said it, but because I was intentional somewhere along the way of ensuring that that's the way it gets done when people leave my shop or my store.
And this is a verification process as well that sounds like it comes from a place of regular communication, regular resourcing. How do you maintain the circulation of the right kind of memory within your organization so that people are always focused on what matters amidst all of the other stuff that has to get done every day, every week?
So, and it is two things. And for your audience and perhaps colleagues who have multiple locations, they already know this. It is, and as boring and quite frankly, maybe even cliche as it sounds, people, we have 4 core values. One, we never apologize for sitting atop the others. Our best business asset is our team. And yet those are just hollow words unless 2 things happen. Number one, we indicate how that's true. We reinforce it with action. And then secondly, we remind people of things that we've done. We bring that up at regular times when there is something to celebrate. We indicate once again, it is true. Our best business asset is our team. We never miss an opportunity to let people know and hear that core value means so much. So people are the first thing. And then the second, sadly, perhaps for those of us that just like to let our creative expression fly, but there need to be, and you said it, Chris, there need to be processes. We talk about systemization and how can we systemize friendliness? How can we systemize enthusiasm and empathy? And here's what everybody knows, whether you like Disney or not, whether you have had a meal anytime recently at Chick-fil-A or not, but all of these other brands that we can hear the stories about, and perhaps even in some instances, we can aspire to be more like, they've built systems for those expressions. The friendliness at Disney, the processes at Chick-fil-A were developed intentionally and ultimately put in motion systematically. And unless we make a commitment to do that, so we have all the things, right? We've got the training manuals, we've got the training curriculum, we have the feedback sessions, we have the benchmarks. And for those who know they've got a great product, every Americano they make turns out perfectly. They have the big email distribution list, or they have all the followers on their social media platforms. Going to another, I'm not even going to say a second, but going to another operation with only those things, but not the systems in place and the people you trust, will make it really, really difficult, not just to scale, but quite frankly, to keep the reputation of your brand and the mission that you started with intact. Because as it expands, obviously there are more who come in contact with what you're trying to do and what you're all about. And you don't want that mission to change. You don't want the core of your brand to be perceived differently in another experience, in another shop, in another market. So it is people and it is processes. And for somebody who thought, well, maybe I could just will it, or I could just communicate it through this same technology if I send out videos every once in a while, it's got to be much deeper than that. It has to be intentional, and it has to be done on a regular basis through people.
Sure. What is it about the scaling effort as you grow that requires the reinforcement of systems? Because a lot of people do have this idea, and I think it's not without merit that, and I also recommend people do this, where they seed the culture with some of their top performers to a second location. So let's say they're opening a second store. You've got somebody who's just like, man, they are the like epitome of this brand or something. Now they're going to go and they're going to help like represent the in-action values of that company to the second location. But I think a lot of people do rely on, they're going to catch the culture. They're going to, by osmosis, create momentum just by talking about it a lot, but they don't have the systems in place. And I guess you could start with the systems and stay with the systems and not have the spirit behind it. What I hear you saying is that you need both, but what is it about the scaling effort that requires reinforcement in order for that more relational component to be preserved?
Well, I love the fact that you use the term spirit, because that's where the people are an absolute requirement. If you don't have the right people to convey and carry the spirit, no matter how good your processes are, because eventually we're all in this service industry. And if we don't have that ability to make those connections, then the rest of it almost doesn't matter. Another place where we have tremendous carryover, Chris, is, some of the best coffee shop owners and managers are probably also the best baristas. And I know, even to this day, I'm a pretty good fitter of shoes. If you came to me into one of our stores, I think you'd feel good about what your selection was if we had the good fortune of working with you. And I was the one personally doing it. But guess what? I'm doing that less and less every year. And the barista who moves into management or ultimately opens up his or her own shop are making fewer drinks. And so now you have just organically come to conclude it's got to be done through people. So to me, the superpower is transparency. As you move into a leadership role, there are going to be people who do not necessarily care about the business of your business, but getting a transparent understanding of why they're there, what is it that is their motivation, maybe even their purpose for coming to your shop and perhaps being part of your team. For a leader to have someone in her care and not know what their purpose or motivation for being, in my opinion, is a big step backwards. Whether you have 2 people or 12 people in your care, you should know what their respective motivation is. And you should have a comfort level that their motivation and the organization's mission and purpose are going to be able to symbiotically move forward together. And then secondly, transparency. There are going to be people who do care about your business, but it's not going to be at the expense of their own well-being. It might be schedule flexibility. It might be wages. It might be other perks or things that only you can provide. But the transparency for those who care, we talk about payroll to revenue ratios all the time. I can tell you on this podcast that we are somewhere between 20 to 22% payroll to revenue, depending on the time of year, depending on the stage of a respective business unit. And we share that with our team because we're looking for ideas. If it's like, hey, if you have an idea as to how we can pay you more and still stay within that range that we have committed to because we want to be around tomorrow. And we know what our cost of goods sold are. And I can tell you what we're paying on a lease. And I can tell you what our utilities are. And I can only beat my landlord up so much. And I'm pretty sure the power company is not going to allow me to send them 40 pairs of shoes and say, we're not paying in currency this month. We're just going to give you shoes. That's not going to work. So to me, the transparency of what is the purpose and motivation, let's share that with each other. And what does the business require? Regardless of whether someone's interested in your business or not, transparency matters a ton and develops the relationship with people that then are the absolute bedrock of the processes that are required, not just to scale, but quite frankly, even just to minimally expand.
It strikes me as you're talking about this that this is hospitality to your staff. It is the customers come into your cafe for shoes that you provide, and you provide an experience. The systems, it sounds like, are the shoes that facilitate the success of your staff. They're going to use those to run in. Those systems are going to have to be fitted according to that individual. The systems that they don't really change, but the way that you communicate that to your staff can change. I love this idea because we say, look, if you study coffee more than you study your people, if you know more about the roast date and the terroir and the elevation of the farm, of what's in the hopper of your espresso grinder right now, then you know about the person working the closing shift on Wednesday, and
Yes.
not only their aptitude for the job requirements, but I love how you said their motivation for being there to begin with, and how you can kind of come alongside them. Then it's really just a matter of time until something happens where you're going to be chasing down something that you can't really pinpoint because you never really anchored yourself to begin with. So we blame that this generation, they're this or that, or the economy or whatever it might be. But it may have just been what you're really hammering home here is this intentionality that is really the linchpin for the whole thing.
It is. And for leaders who know this matters, not just to them, but it matters to those they serve. It matters perhaps to the communities they're in. They can find their purpose, or as we've all heard, they know their why. But if we are not able to invest ourselves, avail ourselves to the whys of others, we're on the journey alone. And you got to be intentional about that. People love to talk about themselves, but they don't love to talk about who they really are and maybe what matters the most to them. You might be able to get some clues, but you've got to ask thoughtful questions. You've got to ask follow-up questions. You've got to listen. And it takes time. That's why, to me, reporting structures be damned perhaps, but there are people in your care and you can specify them perhaps by name. And as a business grows, sometimes the quantity of people in your care or who report to you, that number increases. You will need to figure out how to get more efficient at ensuring that you understand their motivation and that you connect with them in a material way. Or you will have to make other things less of a priority or make them go away altogether to be able to continue to have appropriate amounts of time for that. And sometimes that's the biggest challenge for those of us. I'm sure the same is true in your industry. There are some coffee roaster geeks, I'm sure, on the other side of this conversation. And they could tell us all kinds of very cool things about what they're roasting and the origin story and what is being done to make it come together so perfectly. But the truth is, if we look at how many people are in and out of a cup of coffee or maybe even a bag of beans today, my estimation would be a huge percent of them don't really care. But they really do care about how that is going to benefit them. And the same thing is true for a pair of running shoes. Most people don't really care. They want to have some confidence that they're not buying something that's going to make it worse or that they're going to feel like wasn't a good return on whatever they spent. But what they really want is something that they come away with going, I would do that again. And it's not in the coffee formula. It's not in, heck, you can appreciate this, Chris, when you ran cross country and you mentioned getting on as a team, kind of going through the course, right? Being with your team and talking about it, or just some of the memories probably of just going there as a team. One of the soapboxes I've been on in our industry is, and you can picture this, whether you've been in a running store recently or not, it's the manufacturer producing imagery, whether it's for their website, whether it's for a digital correspondence, whether it's for a poster that hangs in the stockroom. A beautiful backdrop, somebody by themselves who looks super fit. Nobody comes into our store like that. It's like they must not have a job, right?
Yeah.
Wherever they are looks so far away from civilization. They must be on vacation or a
Yeah.
sabbatical
Yeah.
or whatever. They're maybe retired. They're super fit. They quite frankly don't need me. They're probably getting their stuff for free. If you're that fit, all you got to do is pick up the phone and call a manufacturer and be like, hey, I run 2:17 in the marathon. Can you send me a pair of shoes? And almost everybody will. So they don't need me if they look like that. So let's create this realistic indication of who we want here. And the same thing is true in a coffee shop. We want people who are just looking for an amazing place to spend time with friends. We want people who want to come in and feel like they're their best selves all day while they're here. And then let's just go to work.
Yeah. Man, this is truly inspirational. I think the idea is getting involved in the everyday realities of the people we work with, the people we serve and work for, and being intentional in these relationships naturally produces this kind of desire to and direction for creativity to produce the system, the poster, the interaction, the ideas, the legends that are retold about your stores, between managers, and that kind of keeps people fueled for the race that's before them. This is what you do, and not every business is going to last for 100 years. There's like maybe 3 or 4 coffee shops in the world that are like 100, 200 years old. Most of our places are just little stops along the way in this life, and the legacy that we leave, it tends to be based on just those tiny interactions that get multiplied by what you said earlier. Memory magnifies and creates this like swell of what turns into legend, a legendary place, because memory keeps on adding to the virtue that people experience as that little seed. So if we look at it from this perspective of like, you could have just walked away from that interaction thinking you did nothing for that person except sell them a new pair of laces, or you told them which filter was best for their home coffee machine. In their world, the meaning of that moment is interpreted maybe way differently than you could ever perceive. And so if we just kind of think that way, it'll give us energy to create the environments that produce a consistent delivery of, we have faith that this is actually going to turn into something good, even if in front of us it doesn't. So Mike, I last question for you here. I would love for you to speak to operators of coffee shops, small businesses, generally the people who are working with teams of other people to produce something that is not just transactional, but is deeply meaningful and creates momentum for a healthy business, but just kind of creating a movement and maintaining movement.
So I would say a couple of things, Chris. First of all, and it's easy for us to have this conversation, and it's clear both of us love what we do. And I would imagine, most everyone who listens to this also at some level, maybe at every level, loves what they do as well. But let's not kid ourselves. It is hard, and it candidly is supposed to be hard. So recognizing that it's supposed to be hard gives you a little bit of confidence that maybe you're not doing it wrong. Like some days, maybe some seasons feel like I must not be doing this right. because I had no idea it was going to be this hard, right? I would just say, to use your term earlier, faith it till you make it, friends, because it is supposed to be hard. And there are seasons, in my experience, they're going to be just harder than what you had anticipated. People will let you down, maybe even betray you. And you will be doing it all over again. And you will be back a few steps and in a place where you thought you had already gotten past. That's just kind of the way it works. So don't think just because Chris and I have this conversation and we sit in the comfort of our offices and we have these really cool conversations about all the impact we can make and the transformation that can happen inside a cafe or inside a running store. That's all true, yes, but it's hard. And then the second thing that I would say, and you mentioned, the race set before us. And so what I'll do is, maybe I'll lean into my faith a little bit. And whether you're a Christ follower like I am or not, here's what I would say is the expression, I'm passionate about running, is one of my least favorite, despite the fact that it's one of the most stated during an interview or when I'm talking with a guest. Here's why it's one of my least favorite, is because if we go back to the root of passion, to passeo, it is to suffer. The passion of the Christ, as an example, the suffering of Christ. Someone who's passionate about running in the afterglow of just having finishing a race, or because they met their future spouse at this Tuesday night pub run, that's not a passion about running. That's enjoyment, which is fantastic. We're trying to manufacture a ton of that as well. It's inspiration to get up and do it again tomorrow. We're all for that. But as leaders in this industry, as contributors in this industry, as business owners in this industry, we have to truly have a passion for service. We need to be passionate about the industry. And as soon as we say we're passionate about running or retail or service or hospitality, we have to be willing to suffer. And that's when we recognize that we're not just not doing it to the point where it might be considered wrong, we're actually doing it right. It is hard, and we are suffering, and it's worth it because there's something out there that we just recognize is so far beyond ourselves that this makes sense. So I would just leave you with that, Chris, because I know I've been in too many places, both that I have left. I'm like, I would come back here. The hardest, well, we say guest, but it would be customer patron. The hardest guest to serve is the one who had an amazing experience last time, because their expectations have already been set super high. And now you have no choice but to at least get there or clear it and reset it to make it harder on the next barista, on the next sales associate to have to then do that. But to do that time and time again, it's going to be hard and we're going to suffer. And then we just know, man, it's worth it because they felt that good about it and it makes such a big difference.
Mike, perfect way to wrap up our conversation. I feel like that's the charter. That's our commission here to go and do that. And I appreciate your passion for people. Use the word passion, and the thing that you've built with Big Peach and the kind of example it sets for us and the lessons you've learned have really been instructive here today. So I appreciate you being here on the show. Where can we go to learn more about Big Peach and also pick up your book?
Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you. I mean, you're such a thoughtful dude. So thanks seriously for having me today. This has been really cool. For those who are interested, the book is it's not the bricks, it's the mortar. Optimize your retail business for lasting success. You can find it where books are sold. You can check out our website. There's some cool features and things that you can download there. That's itsthemortar.com. And then if you're looking for a pair of shoes, you just want to learn more about not just running, but quite frankly, walking, comfort, being on your feet on a regular basis, go to bigpeachrunningco.com.
Thank you, Mike.
Chris, thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Well, everybody, I hope that you really enjoyed that conversation and you got a lot from it. So much to think about when it comes to the intentionality behind what we do with the people in our cafes, what we do for the people, the guests in our stores. what is the course? What is the race you're running in your cafe, in your coffee shop? Have you taken the time to think through the kind of relationship you have with your team to produce the experience for the guest that transcends the transactional? That is something that provides a memory, a lasting experience and memory of that experience. Like Mike was saying, such a great way to put it. So huge thank you to Mike for being on the show. Again, if you are interested in learning more about Big Peach, go to their website, bigpeachrunningco.com. And if you're interested in the book, you can go to itsthemortar.com, or you can go on Amazon and elsewhere like Barnes and Nobles and look up the book. It's Not the Bricks, It's the Mortar by Mike Cosentino. So that would be really worth the read. And as you hear from this conversation, there's more to read in the book to add to the depth of what was already covered, which is extremely valuable. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback about today's episode, you're always welcome to email Chris@keystotheshop. That's CHRIS @keystotheshop. And I'm happy to receive any kind of communication from the Keys to the Shop audience from around the world. How are we doing? What questions do you have? Do you need further clarity? Can we help you with any kind of speaking or consulting and coaching and services through Keys to the Shop Consulting? There are lots of things we can have a conversation about, but that you reach out first, of course, is the first step, and I'm happy to engage in conversation with you. That'd be great. So again, Chris@keystotheshop.com, and check out the website too, keystotheshop.com, Instagram @keystotheshop. It's just Keys to the Shop everywhere. But that's it. That's it for our show, everybody. I appreciate you, as always, supporting the podcast, supporting the business. And if you can rate or review the show, give a 5-star rating or review, that's awesome as well. But I really hope that you all are doing well and that you benefited from today's episode. And of course, I truly hope that today's episode has given you keys to the shop.